Who is the worst punk band?
God, I hate to throw anybody under the bus, but I have to say one band I've never been able to get into is
Jack, you like to call yourself the unofficial punk rock historian, but I am going to deem you the title of the official punk rock historian. You saved me from a bad relationship, my friend, so I owe
That's
you,
crazy.
okay? You were like the goat in my life. I was
That's
dating this
crazy.
woman and I was trying to introduce her to punk and
Right.
especially street punk. She's like, "Oh, I know punk. I know Blink-182." And I'm like, "That's not Sim Parker is not punk. Sorry, but I found one of your videos on Street Punk and
Yeah.
I sent it to her and she's like, "This is weird. I think you're part of a cult." And we ended. So thank you
Yeah.
because
Yeah. No, that's amazing. That's absolutely brilliant. Dude. No one's ever told me anything like that. I love that. Oh yeah.
you saved me. I would probably be at a Lizzo concert right now if it wasn't for you or something. So
Fucking A. Hell yeah, dude.
you saved
Hell
me.
yeah.
So punk rock historian on YouTube. You got 30,000 subscribers. You have a
30,000.
total view of 1.1 million
Wow.
views. Why did you start this? How did you get started? How did you get down this rabbit hole to do
So
the
I had
punk rock historian?
I've played in bands my whole life. I have actually never done any kind of film editing type of thing like this before I did the punk historian thing. I just played in bands, played, guitar, wrote songs, played drums. I played drums in a band once. I played shows in the Northwest around where I lived. I lived out in Minnesota for a while. I played shows out there, but I'd always, everybody you talk to at shows, everybody you talk to who's into really any music scene, they all know all of this different shit about all these different bands, all these different, records and like when this album came out, what label it came out. But there isn't really an easy way to learn that. Everybody kind of has to like go through that process of trying out this record, trying out that record, and like not all of it's great, obviously. And sometimes you're going to go home with something that's just like, damn it, why did I buy that? but and so I liked the idea of being able to kind of point people in the right direction of this. Like, well, this is pretty good. This is a good starting place. If you're trying to get into something more like this is a good starting place to go with that because when I grew up in a smaller town about 30 minutes outside of Seattle, and there weren't a whole lot of other people into punk around where I live, so I was mostly just sampling whatever, and sometimes I'd come home and with an album that turned out to be kind of mediocre. But then I saw Finn Mckenty on YouTube, and he was talking about punk. He was also talking a lot about metal. He talks a lot more about metal, but he was also talking about punk, and I was just like, it would be cool to do this, but just talk about punk rock. But the thing is, I was questioning myself at the time. I was like, could I really make it like, or like even get a fraction of what he has? Because this guy has all these credentials. He's done, freelance work for all these bands from like the early 2000s and the early 2010s that were in the like emo metalcore scene. He has all these credentials, like doing art, some kind of freelance work for them. He knew all these classic hardcore bands back in the day. So it's just like I'm not in the inner circle like that. But then I saw this other guy. There was a couple other guys that were doing similar content to what I do. One of them was just talking about emo, and the other one was just talking about extreme metal. And then I saw these guys, the Cozy representative Julian and Wyatt X Him. Cozy representative, he talks about emo, and then Wyatt X Him, he's more extreme metal, like and grindcore and stuff like that. And then these guys were just people like me, just buying records, playing in bands, just liked music. And I was just like, I could do what these guys are doing for punk rock. And so I put a couple videos together, showed them to my friends, and they were like, you need to upload that right now. And I was just like, I don't know. I was kind of on the fence about it. And so then I was like, maybe I'll do one more. And if people keep telling me, people in my circle keep telling me to upload it, I'll upload this one. And so I did the video about all the 90s pop punk and all the more like gruff pop punk stuff from the 2000s, bands like Screeching Weasel and D4 and Off With Their Heads. And I uploaded it and people seemed to like it. And for a while I was doing weekly uploads. I took some time off of school and just went back to work full time at the feed store I was working at. near my hometown, and I just cranked out a video every single week, and it just it built up a little bit of a fan base, and then lo and behold, around March of last year, I put out that big colossal video about suicidal tendencies, and it just popped the fuck off, and here we are.
221,000 views about suicidal tendencies. And that video popped for you, man. And
dude,
now growing up, I'm older than you. And, I got into punk in the 90s.
right.
Right on the end of Op Ivy. They were in the late 80s, but then in 90s, we got into the Skatepunk era, NoFX, who apparently you're a stand for.
Yeah.
Anything Fat Mike, apparently it's like, I mean, do you have a Fat Mike tattoo?
I have a NoFX tattoo. It's a evil clown
there you go.
tattoo. Yeah.
So how did you get into punk?
Well, yeah, like I said, I grew up in Seattle, so like even when I was in middle school, people still were, the grunge music was really, really popular up here. And when I was that age, that sort of like emo pop punk sort of sound was really, really trendy as well. And so I was into a little bit, I had a little foot into that, little foot into the grunge, but it didn't quite fit right. And then, I was 13. I heard Bad Religion in these games, Guitar Hero, the video game. I heard Bad Religion. I was like, what the fuck is this? This is rad. This is like nothing I've ever heard before. And, after that, it was Rancid, NoFX, Black Flag, Dead Kennedys. And it was just like, shit, this is it. And, it was interestingly enough, it was mostly through the internet and YouTube and, Blogspot, websites like that, because like I said, I grew up in a more suburban community with not a whole lot of music and art culture around. And I was, for pretty much most of my adolescence, the only punk kid I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was largely how I got into punk rock was through the internet. And then I would go to see shows. I found out bands would be playing, bands that I knew I liked. And, sometimes I would meet other kids there that were also the same age. It's like, oh, hey, I also got into punk rock through the internet and stuff like that. Or, even I started playing guitar and bass when I was in middle school, and through the music lessons place I was taking lessons at, I would also sometimes meet other kids there that, had the similar experience. And that's how I started my first band. We played our first shows and all that stuff. But yeah, it was a lot of it honestly had to do with the internet. And maybe that's kind of something that pushed me towards, giving back via the internet about punk rock.
Now, NoFX, your favorite band of all, is that your band?
Suicidal Tendencies is my favorite band of all
time. All right.
Yeah.
All right. When you've done these videos, have you heard from any of the artists that you've talked about? Has anybody?
Yeah. I actually have the first and this was before I don't even think I had 1,000 subscribers yet. Jake Kiley and Chris Aiken from Strung Out commented on my video about them, and it blew my mind. I was just like, whoa, where did you find this? Dude, this is, because I used to post my videos in the punk rock Facebook groups, and I was in a Strung Out group, because Strung Out's another one of my favorite bands. I was in a group about them, and I just posted my video in there, and I guess it got shared to Rob Ramos, and he sent it to the rest of the guys. And so then lo and behold, they just commented on it. And so that was super cool. I've gotten comments from a few other people. I think the drummer there was this band called Patriot. I don't remember they were kind of a street punk band. He commented on there. The drummer from Oi Polloi, he left me a comment at one point. I think the bass player from Indie K saw one of my videos. I think he saw, that was back again. And this was back before, I think I probably had about 1,000 subs around the time these guys found me. And it was just because I was talking about their bands, and they didn't, because these aren't bigger name bands. This isn't NoFX or Bad Religion. This is, these, you don't hear these bands mentioned as much, and so
Right.
people are, oh, hey, appreciate the shout out. One of the first people to share my videos was the lead singer of a band called Straight Line from Germany, and he's been a regular viewer of mine ever since. But I talked about his band and a bunch of his friends' bands on there, and they're doing reasonably well. They have a following. They're not super big.
Right.
I wouldn't even say as big as like a band like Strung Out or Propagandhi, but they definitely have a following. But I think that those kind of smaller bands but still with following sharing me in the beginning definitely helped me get more viewership as well. So I do want to shout out them as well. Bart from Straight Line, thank you very much.
Now, when you're going to make a video, like you just
Yeah.
released the Labeled Legends Fat Rex Chords one,
Yeah,
which was a great video. Everybody go to YouTube and check it out.
thank you very
Without
much.
giving away all of your secrets, walk us through the process of just creating the video. Right now, you probably have a ton in your head that you're like, oh, I want to do something like this. Is it the genre first? Are we going to start with like crust punk, or is it a band that kind of gets you into that subgenre to create the video? Like, how do you start the process to make a new video?
Well, yeah, I pick a subject, so it'll be crust punk or suicidal tendencies or fat records. I pick a subject, and then what I do is I kind of edit, or I write a script up, and while I write that script, I search online, I gather as much information from wherever I can find. I mean, it's sometimes I look through Wikipedia. Sometimes I watch documentaries a lot. I watch a ton of documentaries when I make these things, and a lot of times you'll find that people have assembled these sort of homemade websites of sorts with a lot of information on bands, but sometimes that means going through more than one of those to make sure what they've written on there is correct.
Right.
But that all sort of takes place over the same period of time, and it generally tends to take the longest, and mostly just because I have to verify that all of my information is incredibly accurate. And then after that, I'll record my voiceover. The part that you hear under the clips playing, I'll record that. And then I'll film the clips of myself talking in a different sitting. Sometimes I'll do that on the same day. Other times I'll do it on separate days. And then after that, I'll have to gather all the pictures and the clips and stuff that I use for the videos. And sometimes I'll have a lot of that stuff preloaded on my computer. Like this last video on Fat Wreck, because I've talked about a bunch of those bands already so much. I already had a ton of that stuff already loaded on my computer. So I didn't have to do quite as much vault digging for videos and pictures and stuff. But then once I have all of that, then I start the editing process. Usually takes a day or two, and then upload the video. I try to upload on weekends because that seems to be when videos do the best upon their initial upload, is when I upload, like on a Saturday or Sunday.
It's funny that you said you got to go and cross-reference basically the information, because when I do interviews with artists, I've heard a bunch of stuff through friends, or you see it on Reddit or whatever, and then you're like, I need to check that before I go wide with this information, because some of it is so crazy. You're like, this can't be real. And then you realize it is real.
Yeah.
Or it's completely false. So how long does it take, like hours wise, for you to make the Fat Rex one? How many hours did it take for you to make the 25-minute video?
If I had to guess, at least 30, probably.
Wow.
The scripting process can be very, very long, especially in a broad subject like that, a subject like Fat Records with such a long story, or the Misfits video as well. There's so much to those stories. There's so many little details that you have to verify are correct. That I mean, I found towards the end of that Misfits video, I found myself editing and for two entire days straight. The only thing I did besides edit was exercise and eat and feed my pets. But other times, like I did an album review for my buddy's band, and that was fun. It didn't get as many views, but I had fun doing it. And I want to do some more videos to promote bands I like and bands with people I like in them. And those that content, smaller content videos like that tend to not take as long. I might spend, a couple hours on the script. I just got to listen to the album and write it while I listen to it, and then, an hour to film myself, and then hour and a half to edit. So that can get done, and a video like that can get done in a day or two, depending on what other work I have to do. But yeah, those bigger videos about bands with, especially bands with long stories or labels or genres, those can take especially if I want to go as in depth as I do now, those can take around a week to make.
And so you're monetized, so you're making money from YouTube.
Yes, I am.
I mean, you have achieved what a lot of people, how many abandoned YouTube channels are there that people threw up one video or two and they didn't get the Misfits numbers, 138,000 views, and they just kind of walked away from it.
Yeah.
What is one thing, because you are the punk rock historian in my world?
Hell yeah, cheers.
What advice would you give? When it comes to YouTube, when it comes to the monetization process, because you are throwing up, look, I got some interviews coming up with artists that I know they're not going to do what grade 2 numbers did for me.
Sure.
But I enjoy the band, or I enjoy the music, or whatever. So what advice would you give? And I'm listening because you're the historian here. I'm a stand for you at this moment. What advice would you give to all YouTubers when it comes to creating the content or making a channel or monetization? Like, what is your secret? Because you literally blew up overnight, it seems like.
Yeah, it's in ways like that, those just tend to manifest themselves, but that's a result of me putting in the time to do it, to get to that position where I could. The best thing I would say that can do for a YouTube channel is a consistent subject of some sorts, a theme for the channel. Like you said, you're doing the band interviews or just artist interviews in general. And like what Dan Frampton does, he talks about music, but he has a more comedic tone to it. And like I said, I don't know why his content isn't getting more views. His shit's brilliant. But these a lot of people will just kind of throw random things at the wall and kind of to see what sticks, or they'll just get up of a video of them and their friends just talking, and they're just talking about anything. They don't really have a subject. I would say you need to focus it a little more, especially in the beginning. But like Twitch streaming and podcasting, that tends to come later. Either you've built your audience interviewing people, you've built your audience talking about the histories of things. That seems to be the tried and true method, because Finn Mckenty, he's obviously doing that now. He's doing Twitch streams. He has his own podcast, but he built up the ability to do that through his content of discussing marketing and comparing that to music, and especially in the world of punk and metal and hardcore, where we don't really talk about marketing and music very much. And
right.
That consistent theme tends to really, I think, benefits people the most. Another thing is some form of consistency. It doesn't have to be every week, but I would say once a month. That seems to be working for me pretty well. It certainly is enough to keep your channel alive. And then obviously you want your content to have as much substance as possible, as much as you can. Providing people with things they may not have known. That's right. Really an approach that I've always taken to my content. I don't want to just tell people the things they already know. I want to include information that you might not have known. Like for instance, Rancid had a release on Fat Records. Not a lot of people know that, but they did have one 7-inch release in the early 90s on Fat Rec. But that's just an example. I like to include things like that because that's what keeps the story interesting. That's what keeps it, especially for people that are, not as well versed in the history of different like rabbit holes within punk rock history.
Right. What brought me to your channel is, especially when you're dealing with punk, the bar is so low. whether it be the production value. And I'm talking about like when I interview artists, like they thank me that it was professional, or they thank me that it was a cool hang and not just like this all over the place jackass trying to be cool or whatever.
Right.
And with your videos versus other people who've tried to do what you're doing, try to rip you off, basically, they're not as well thought out. And when I was texting you, I told you I wanted to honor you by showcasing you and the work that you've done. You've mentioned Finn Mckenty, and I love Papa Finn. I mean, I'm a ska fan, so we do disagree. We do disagree. Yeah. Papa Finn is very, very wrong about ska.
Oh, yeah. He's totally wrong about ska.
But he gets a lot of hate. I mean, I interviewed a band, and I was like, hey, you guys know who Finn Mckenty is? And they're like, yeah, we've heard of him. And I was like, well, it was him in his Twitch stream that actually introduced me to you guys. I mean, yeah, he destroyed them, but I heard him and I was like, yeah, they're pretty good. Yeah. What has Finn done, do you think, not only for you, but for this content creating when it comes to punk and hardcore and all that?
I think he really set a standard within it, because he was I would say he was the first person, at least the first person to take off the way he did, that came from the world of punk and hardcore, to gain himself a following talking about music on YouTube. Because like I said, there was a ton of metal guys that were doing it. We had like Jared Dines and Stevie T and all those like really shredder guitar player guys that were, you know, they all about metal, but there was not a lot of punk on those channels. Finn Mckenty was the first person to actually open the doors for, I guess, to prove to the world that punk rock discussion could happen on YouTube. And I also think he really set a standard within musical commentary in general. His delivery is, I've always found his delivery to be pretty on point, especially when he does any kind of historical breakdown and, you know, talks about the business side of things. Like, his delivery is very, very on point. And I've actually tried to shape my videos in a similar way, make sure I'm, you know, enunciating everything right and speaking very clearly in words that everybody can understand, especially maybe people that don't, English isn't their first language. Mm-hmm. His delivery with, when it comes to factual information and, like, you know, I guess insightful discussion has always been very, very on point. And so I think he really set a standard for that. And, you know, I think you could even say that he's maybe influenced music reviews, and that because a lot of these like people that would review punk or metal records in the past, they would just be, you know, filming on a MacBook camera,
right,
with improper lighting like this, and, you know, just on their laptop speakers. And, you know, now the people that are doing that, they're using nicer gear. They have, you know, studio lights and a decent microphone. And I really think, I don't know necessarily if that was because of Finn Mckenty, but I think he definitely had an influence on that, making content about heavy music a little, giving it a chance to be a little more professional, and proving that it could work really well with that attribute applied to it.
And then, you know, Dan Frampton, I actually sent Dan Frampton a message on New Year's Day and he still hasn't checked it.
Oh shit.
So Dan, come on. Dan Frampton is like the guy you invite to the party, because, you know, he's going to be the drunkest one there, and just like make it a good time, you know? And
yeah.
We'll talk about ska for a second here, because you did a video a couple months back on ska and the third wave.
Yeah.
Where do you think it's going? You see what's happened with like the Interrupters.
Yeah.
Catbite is a band that when I posted the video of Catbite, I couldn't believe. And then I did one with Keep Flying. Like, the response I got was huge from people.
Yeah.
And then obviously the Interrupters are the trailblazer right now.
Yeah.
As a historian, where do you think ska is going to land in all of this? Because it seems like, to me, it seems like it's making a comeback.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, to be completely honest, I don't think ska ever really went away, contrary to what a lot of these people like to say. I mean, I grew up going to Warped Tour in the late 2000s and early 2010s, and Less Than Jake and Fish and Goldfinger, and those bands were all still playing that show back then, and they brought some of these newer bands like the Interrupters on there, and they get a lot of traction. And the thing, that they attracted big crowds too. And the thing about ska is that I don't think it necessarily appeals to everyone. There's like I said in my video, there's a cult hate base. There's a group of people that don't like ska, but it seems to have, at least this is something I witnessed. It might have just been part of had to do with the environment of Warped Tour, but something I always witness at Warped Tour is that ska bands would bring in people from all the audiences that were there.
Right.
They would bring in the punk people. They would bring in the emo people. They would bring in the more hipster type of crowd, and they would there's a very unifying aspect of it, and I think that's been present in all forms of ska and reggae over the years, and I think it will be as long as it lasts. And I don't think that kind of music is ever going to go away, ska and reggae. I think there will always be some form of it or another. I think a lot of people who don't have a lot of knowledge about ska, and this is no I'm not trying to sound like condescending with this, but I think a lot of people tend to kind of post it in with punk when it really is its own musical tree. And right. If we're looking at the big picture, I'd say ska absolutely has a future. I mean, and even within its third wave, sort of the third wave form, I would say it still has a future. It's, I don't know if I can say for sure anything. I wouldn't say I could say for sure what it's going to be, what it won't be. But there's been a lot of great ska bands to come out in recent years that I talked about a few of them in the video. That Kill Lincoln band I really like, and We Are the Union, and We Are the Union, that trombone player, they've got their own thing, Jer, and that album was doing really well too. And so I think it's like I said, it's not something that's for everyone, but I also don't think it is gonna go away. I think there will always be an audience for it. Mm-hmm. But I don't think, may not be for everyone, but I think it will always have an audience. But I don't know if it will. I can't say. I don't want to rule this out, because as much as I'd like to see ska get huge again, I don't necessarily know if that's the direction it's headed in. I think it's more gonna stay. It's probably destined for something, a space in music more like where reggae is at.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll call her the lady of my dreams. The woman in my life is not a punk fan. Do you have anybody like that in your world? And how do you sell punk to the normies who, grew up with like normal childhoods and don't understand why you would get band logos tattooed on you? As the historian, how do you sell punk? Because I'm trying to figure it out.
Well, funny story. One of my best friends, one of my childhood friends, he's a total just like, suburban jock dude. And I've known him my whole life. We used to play with action figures together when we were 5 and 6. He's never been into punk rock. He's never, but he's always been one of my biggest supporters. And I think a lot of people can appreciate the passion behind it, the passion for music that a lot of folks have. And I think that's really what sells, at least the importance of music in general to maybe people that don't necessarily understand the music per se, but can appreciate the impact it has on other people and what it can do for other people that they know. Because he's a perfect example of somebody. He tried to have a YouTube channel a while ago, and it didn't. He had trouble taking off, and he saw my numbers. But this was back when I had like 4,000 subs, and he was like, "You have 4,000, dude. You got it. You got to keep going with this." And I was just like, "Yeah, I know." He's like, "No, seriously, you got to, yeah." And then he watched my content, and my folks watched my content at one point, and obviously they're not into punk rock, but they could see it. It was just like, no, you have the information, your delivery with this. And I think that's more at least how I do it, the way I'm able to provide information. My content is very informative. And so I think that's how I guess I personally would go about selling punk rock to the normie who doesn't quite understand.
Now your parents, Thanksgiving, you're sitting around the table and grandma asks what's new with Jack, and your parents say he started a YouTube channel talking about punk rock. How were the parents when you started this?
Well, I mean, this started long before the YouTube channel. I mean, right. I had a mohawk back when I was 13. They didn't like it when I first got into it. I remember playing Rancid for my dad the first time, and he was just like, this is what you're listening to now? And I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And, but he's come around to it. I mean, my parents have definitely come around to it. And I think a lot of it has to do with that they can appreciate that it's something that's had a big impact on my life. I think that's more my family, my relatives can appreciate that. And I've had bands over the years and stuff, and they've seen that, that's been a real life-giving hobby for me. And so I think that's mostly, I think they've come to appreciate it through that. But yeah, I don't think they knew what to do with it in the beginning when I was first spiking up my mohawk and drawing band logos on myself when I was a little kid.
Well, back in the 90s, I was there for that punk revolution.
Yeah.
And my parents would wake up every day and be like, oh, we wonder what hair color he's going to have now. And they tried to, not have me dive into the punk world and to the culture. And because I really think when you get into the punk, and as the historian, the music is so important, but it is about the brotherhood. It is about normally if you're the really popular kid in high school, you're not going to gravitate towards punk because it really has been a voice for those who were kind of left on the side of the road. Now, a couple of questions, and I want to get to your new band. You said that your favorite punk band is Suicidal Tendencies.
Yeah, Suicidal Tendencies, Strung Out, Swingin' Utters. Those are my top three. Who
is the worst punk band? And I'm not talking about the band who played at the pizza shop in Seattle last Friday night, on like a big scale level. The band that you just don't understand. Why do they have any fans? And if you say Rancid, I'm coming after you.
I'm not going to say Rancid. Believe it or not, I've actually seen Rancid more than NoFX because they come to Seattle more. I love Rancid. Okay. I'm just as much a hooligan as I am a NoFX stan.
Hey, you see it? Oh. You see the tattoo?
Hell yeah, man. Rad. God, I hate to throw anybody under the bus, but I have to say one band I've never been able to get into is, and I was just thinking about this the other day because I was talking about Fat Wreck, is Me First and the Gimme Gimmes.
Oh, yeah.
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 Because I even get it. I like the idea of taking a pop song and doing a punk rock version of it, but that's something that's funny for one song.
Right.
I wouldn't pay $50 to go see 2 hours of that.
I'm not the biggest Aquabats fan. I appreciate what they do, but no, they're not as dreadful as Me First and the Gimme Gimmes. That's pretty cringe right there for sure. Mm-hmm. When you post a video, do you get people who comment that you left this band out or you didn't talk? And because in punk there's a ton of gatekeepers.
Oh yeah, people are always going to be like, why didn't you talk about these guys? Some people think I haven't. I don't know about them, and it's just like, no, man, I just didn't have time.
Right.
Kind of anticipate it's one of those things. I mean, I get hate comments for all kinds of stupid shit. People are going to get mad about, people are going to get mad no matter what. And I mean, one of my friends was telling me this when I was starting to go up in numbers. It's like, dude, people are going to say stupid shit no matter what. It's just something you got to expect. I used to get into it with people. I used to sometimes argue back and forth with people, and I would come away from this. I was like, what the fuck was the point of that? We're talking to some just angry fucking jackass on the internet. And so it's just something, as I think a lot of people on YouTube will say this. It's just something you just kind of learn to just kind of ignore.
Well, because the punk gatekeepers are terrible. The internet punk gatekeepers are just reprehensible. They're just, because when I post an interview with an artist, like in subreddits and Reddit's the worst place. They'll
Yeah.
like, oh, they're not punk or they're not ska or they're with Tim Armstrong and they're sellouts. And I'm just like, you are way too worked up about this, right? Like,
Yeah.
go to the gym, get a hobby,
Yeah.
get on a treadmill, stop being a gatekeeper about a genre of music that there wasn't supposed to be any rules.
Exactly.
And now everybody's got rules. So you play bass, right?
I play bass, guitar, drums, sing. I write a lot of songs. I've spent a lot of time playing music.
Okay, so we'll go down this. Best songwriter in punk.
Oh boy. That is a hard one. Objectively, I'll give you my top three objectively. Probably Fat Mike, Tim Armstrong, maybe Joe Strummer. And I'm not even that die hard of a Clash stan, but like,
right,
my dad likes the Clash, and he liked the Clash before I got into punk rock. So that's got to count for something.
Who is? We'll keep going. Who is the greatest punk guitar player as a historian?
Rocky George from Suicidal.
Okay, best bass player.
Matt Freeman.
Okay, there we go.
Or Brian Robinson from Wilhelm Scream.
Okay, and this gonna be a tough one because there's like 5,000 of them out of like 10 bands. Best punk drummer, because there's always every punk band burns through drummers. It seems like that's every except for NoFX hasn't had any band member changes, have they?
Not since '92. El Jefe's been playing for NoFX since 1992,
and Rancid's had one. I mean, it's not like hardcore bands. You go look at a Wikipedia page on a hardcore band, and there's 47 previous band members.
It's.
But who's the best punk drummer, you think? And Travis Barker's not punk.
Yeah. I personally, I think Jordan Burns from Strung Out was a phenomenal drummer. I don't know why he ended up parting ways with the band, because he was in the band for a long time, and I thought he was a fucking phenomenal drummer. See who else. I gotta give some credit to Smelly, because he's just been such a been a killer drummer for so long, and he's been doing it for so long. And then I would say Josh Freese from the Vandals. Yeah.
There's rumors that he's going to be the new drummer for the Foo Fighters.
Really?
He's like one of the rumors. Yeah. I haven't bagged on NoFX a lot, so my question is why?
Why am I a NoFX fan?
Why NoFX?
NoFX?
I never got into them. I was a Rancid kid, and I just thought Rancid was a lot, because NoFX was doing the Skatepunk thing, and they mastered that, and I was just kind of more into the street punk era.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So sell me as a historian on the brilliance of NoFX as the curtain call is happening for their career. After what was it? Almost
40 years.
40 years.
Yeah.
Why?
It will be 40 years when they end their tours next summer.
Are you gonna do a video about?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna do a NoFX retrospective. I'm probably gonna do that around the time, like probably hopefully the weekend before I go to both of those shows down in Tacoma.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be rad to drop that beforehand. But anyway, on the brilliance of NoFX, well, I guess I grew up snowboarding and skateboarding a little. I didn't get into skateboarding until I was a little older, but I grew up doing that stuff. And so just the fact that this whole skate punk thing was so tied in with that, I think that's something that really made it appeal to me. It was really fast paced. It was just the speed of it is something I always really like. I always really like this the I was like fast music, I was always into the, before I was into punk proper, I was into the pop punk shit. And a lot of those bands would play really fast, and they would have solid choruses and stuff like that. But then to hear it done with a lot more of an edge to it, and a little bit more, consciousness within the lyrics, instead of just writing songs about girls or
Mhm.
you know parties and stuff. Some of these songs were real political, or social commentary and stuff, and hearing it done that way was that's what really blew my mind, because I was kind of almost going back in the timeline from Blink 182 to NoFX.
Mhm.
And then it was just like, wow, these guys are doing what these guys were doing, but they're doing it with the aggression of like Nirvana. And but they're doing it way better than both of those bands. um,
Right.
Something I've always loved about NoFX has been their riffing. I grew up playing bass and guitar and stuff, and a lot, and I went through a series of like a lot of time just sitting in my room practicing. And NoFX have always been a great been a good at structuring riffs really well in songs. You think about a song like "Sticking in My Eye," and then there's another part that, I mean, those aren't super hard to play, I would say. I mean, I would say most intermediate level guitar players can play those guitar parts, but coming up with that and structuring it in the right order is a whole different thing. Because I briefly took some songwriting classes when I first went back to college. I took some songwriting classes, and I learned a lot about songwriting, and it kind of gave me a perspective of uh it kind of changed my perspective about certain punk bands, and it made me appreciate NoFX even more, just of how great they are at structuring songs. And the Fat Mike isn't the best singer, but that certainly adds to it, and they write their songs in a way that complements that. And yeah, other than that, I mean, they've still the speed. I can't get off of that. I mean, I love super fast bands. Obviously, I love Strung Out and shit, and Propaganda, and the speed, the melody, and the guitar riffing. I would say that's the biggest sell for me. And then the next layer of that would probably be these more conscious lyrics, but I guess delivering them in a way that makes them a little more digestible than. And I would say a lot of bands of their era are very good at this too, but a little more digestible even than Bad Religion. I mean, Bad Religion obviously has a lot of those same great qualities, but some of their stuff can come across as very cerebral.
Mm-hmm.
And NoFX I would say, is a good starting point to that, because I think I got real big into NoFX before I got big into Bad Religion. I got big into NoFX. They were probably the first punk band I truly fell in love with, and then Bad Religion I got more into as I got a little older, into high school and shit. And so I would say delivering their message in a way that is a little more digestible, but not so digestible that it's becomes corny and just too soft.
Right.
Yeah.
I learned.
Now,
I
yep.
learned from your Fat Wreck video. I had no clue, because I mean, you listen to NoFX and you can. I mean, they've even written songs. I hat tip to Dan Frampton for this one. I learned that Fat Mike wrote songs about Bad Religion, and how much like they ripped him off, and he's very open about the fact that they ripped off Bad Religion. But from your Fat Wreck video, I didn't know that basically they modeled Fat Wreck after Epitaph.
Yep.
So Fat Mike pretty much owns all of his career to Brett Gurewitz.
Oh yeah.
So you got a new band. We can tell me about the new band.
Teenage Creep Show. We've got kind of a Screeching Weasel, Teen Idols, kind of 90s Ramonesy type of vibe. That's what my buddy AJ, the guitar player, is really into. I'm real into that stuff too. That was the first video I did on my channel. And our drummer used to play guitar in this band called Dead Streets from around here that Zest used to play with a lot last year. And they're still going, and they're going to be doing their first couple of shows here next month too. But Justin quit Dead Streets last summer, and then he introduced me to AJ because he lives up north and he was looking to get a band together, and he writes songs, and I write a lot of songs, and Justin knows we're both real into that stuff. And so that's how that kind of came together. He introduced us, and before that, AJ was just like taking a guitar and playing and singing at shows to try and see if he could grab anybody's attention. And I think that's how him and Justin met. They were playing he was playing somewhere up in Everett, and he caught his set and was like, "Hey, I like that. If you need a drummer, yada, yada." And then they pulled me in. And so that's, I'm pretty excited about it. Like I said, we're going to be doing our first show next month. I'll be posting some clips from that on Instagram and stuff. It should be a good time. Nothing's
on Spotify yet or Apple Music?
No, we haven't recorded for that band yet. Zest just got done recording our EP. That's going to be coming out hopefully after we find ourselves a drummer. Okay. But that'll be out in, I think in March, April, sometime like that. Our other guitar player, he was doing all the mixing and the mastering. And so he's working on that now. We just got all the vocals done. We recorded the drums and the guitars and the bass before we went on tour last summer. And then we just got done with the vocals. Took a little break after touring because touring can be a lot. But yeah, that's going to be coming out pretty soon. I'm super pumped for that. I'm going to be promoting that on YouTube and just, on Instagram and trying to get that band back out there. But Teenage Creepshow will probably hit the studio towards the end of this year, I'd say.
I love the name Teenage Creepshow. I think that's a pretty cool name.
Yeah, it's AJ came up with it. I love it too.
And you gotta let me know when you guys get shirts because I just think it's a cool name. Now, How can people get a hold of you? How can they find out more about you being the historian of punk rock, Teenage Creepshow, your music? How can they get in contact with you? And don't act like Dan Frampton. And you've been great. You responded to my messages, unlike Dan Frampton. But I'm not going to keep holding a grudge.
All right.
How can they get in contact with you?
Yeah. Find me on Instagram at _punk_historian. I'm real responsive on there. That's I would say the number one way to get in contact with me fastest. I'm pretty responsive to comments on YouTube, but sometimes sometimes I get a lot of them, and I'm not always able to get to every single one. But yeah, the best way is slip into my DMs, send me something, and yeah, and the band's all on there I think it's just at teenage_creepshow, and then at zest_band_. You can find those on Instagram as well. I think AJ does most of the stuff for a Creep Show, but I run the page for Zest most of the time, and so I'm pretty responsive on both. I check both regularly, so yeah.
Well, Jack, I just got to thank you for today, and thank you for the content. Content that you create on YouTube is superior tier. I think that you are in some of the stuff with some of the genres and some of the artists. I think you're a lot nicer to them or their albums that they've put out or what some of the genres, subgenres are. I think you're a lot nicer to that. I just honor you for the content that you make. I wish you nothing but success. I want to bring you back on in a few months. We can talk.
I'd love to do that.
When you got a new video or we got an update on Teenage Creepshow or Zest.
Hell yeah.
But, just thank you for what you do for the genre. I mean, one of the reasons why I interview just certain types of bands is because, this is, man, punk got me through some really weird times in my life growing up. And I've, when you got the music, you got a place to go, basically. And yeah. I thank you for what you've done. I thank you for helping make quality content in the punk world. And I just, thanks for coming on today and talking with me and hanging out and just, always stay in touch. You got my number, so stay in touch,
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, man. This is rad. I'm super stoked to be on here. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm happy to come back on in the next couple months. Like you said, that'd be rad.
Maybe,
So yeah.
maybe you and I can go bum rush the museum. I want to go to the punk rock museum with the punk rock historian.
Hell yeah, dude. That sounds rad.
We'll go there and you can like sniff a guitar strap. Jack, thanks for your time, buddy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthew.